Picture this. It's Tuesday morning. You're standing in your kitchen scrolling through your banking app. The number at the top says $87,000. Same number it said last month, same number it'll say next month. You feel safe. You shouldn't. Because that number, it's a lie. Not because your bank is stealing from you, not because there's fraud, but because the value behind that number is evaporating while you sleep. And the worst part, you won't notice until it's too late. Meet David. He's 42, works in tech, pulls in $180,000 a year, has $320,000 sitting in his 401k. He checks it every few months, watches it grow, feels responsible, feels prepared. Last Tuesday, David went to Whole Foods, spent $47 on groceries. The same cart cost him $32 3 years ago. He noticed, rolled his eyes, thought inflation, and moved on. Here's what David doesn't know. His savings have already been cut in half. The number still says $320,000, but the things that number can buy, that list shrinks every single day. And it's not temporary, it's not a phase, it's the mathematical certainty that has destroyed every paper currency in human history. Everyone's worried about inflation, about recession, about whether the Fed will cut rates or hold steady. But they're missing the much bigger threat hiding in a single number that determines when currencies collapse, a number that's been documented across 775 fiat currencies over the past 500 years. The threshold is 27 years, and the US dollar crossed that line in 1998. We'll get to why that specific number matters and what it means for your money in a moment. But first, let me show you what's already happening to David. The timer isn't starting. It already ran out. There's a number financial experts don't talk about at cocktail parties. It makes people uncomfortable, ruins the vibe. 27 years. That's the average lifespan of a fiat currency. Not 100 years, not 500, 27. A fiat currency is any money not backed by gold or silver or anything physical. It's backed by trust, by a government's promise, by the collective belief that a piece of paper or a number on a screen holds value. Here's the problem with promises. They expire. The US dollar went full fiat in 1971. Richard Nixon closed the gold window, told the world the dollar would no longer be redeemable for gold. It would float, be managed, be trusted. That was 54 years ago. We're double the average lifespan. Every single day past 27 years is statistical overtime, and the house always collects. David doesn't think about 1971. Nobody does. It feels ancient, irrelevant. But here's the thing about slow-motion collapses. You don't see them until you're standing in the wreckage. The mainstream narrative tells you the dollar is stable because it's still the reserve currency, because everyone still uses it, because the system is too big to fail. They're lying to you. Not maliciously, they just don't understand the pattern. Let's do some uncomfortable math. Take $100 in 1971. What does it buy you today in January 2026? About $7. That's not a typo. The dollar has lost 93% of its purchasing power in 54 years. Your grandparents' money died a slow death. It just took half a century to bleed out. Now ask yourself this: why would your dollar be any different? David's $320,000 feels safe because the number's big, because it's growing, because his financial advisor nods approvingly during quarterly reviews. But strip away the nominal digits. Look at what that money actually does. 3 years ago, $320,000 could buy 160,000 gallons of milk at $2 per gallon. Today, with milk averaging $4.50 per gallon, that same $320,000 buys 71,000 gallons. David lost 89,000 gallons of purchasing power. The number in his account didn't change. The reality did. This is the invisible collapse. It doesn't arrive with sirens, no breaking news alert, no panic. Just a quiet erosion that compounds daily until one morning you wake up and realize you can't afford the life you used to have. But here's where it gets darker. David thinks he's diversified. He's got stocks, bonds, a 401k split across index funds. His advisor called it a balanced portfolio. Balanced against what? Everything David owns is denominated in dollars. His stocks pay dividends in dollars. His bonds return principal in dollars. His savings account accrues interest in dollars. When the dollar loses value, his entire net worth loses value simultaneously. That's not diversification. That's concentration risk dressed up in different asset wrappers. And the system knows this. Let me introduce you to the villain. It's not the Federal Reserve, it's not greedy bankers or corrupt politicians. Those are symptoms. The villain is the system itself, the structural impossibility of a debt-based fiat currency. Here's how it works. The US government spends more than it collects, always has, always will. To cover the gap, it borrows, issues bonds, promises to pay back the principal plus interest. But here's the trap. The debt compounds, grows exponentially, and the only way to service exponentially growing debt is to expand the money supply. Print more dollars, lower interest rates, inject liquidity. Call it quantitative easing, call it stimulus, call it whatever makes it sound responsible. What you're actually doing is devaluing every dollar already in existence. Your savings aren't collateral damage, they're the fuel. The system requires your purchasing power to evaporate so it can survive another quarter. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a feature. Now here's the pattern interrupt. You're probably thinking, okay, but the dollar is still the world reserve currency. Everyone uses it, it's stable. Was. The dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has been dropping for decades. In the mid-1970s, it was 80%. By 2020, it fell to 65%. As of Q4 2025, it's hovering around 58%. That's a 22 percentage point decline in 50 years. Sounds gradual, sounds manageable, but reserve currency collapses don't happen linearly, they accelerate. The British pound was the world's reserve currency for over a century. In 1913, Britain was the world's largest creditor nation. By 1956, it was a net debtor. Sterling lost its reserve status within a generation. The exact same structural forces that killed the pound are active in the dollar right now. Rising debt, falling trust, competitors circling. When the world stops trusting your money, it doesn't announce it. There's no press release, no official ceremony. Countries just stop buying. Central banks quietly diversify into euros, yuan, gold, and by the time you notice, the exits are jammed. David doesn't follow reserve currency data. He doesn't need to. His job is to make $180,000, save responsibly, and trust the system. But the system isn't designed to protect David. It's designed to transfer his wealth upward through inflation while keeping the numbers on his screen high enough that he doesn't panic. Let's run the historical playbook. Germany, 1923, the Weimar Republic. You've heard the story. Hyperinflation, wheelbarrows of cash to buy bread. But here's what they don't teach you. It didn't happen overnight. In 1921, the mark was 60 to the dollar. Expensive, but manageable. By mid-1922, it was 320 to the dollar. People noticed, adjusted, kept living. Then the acceleration hit. By November 1923, it was 4.2 trillion marks to the dollar, an 18-month collapse. If you held paper marks, you lost everything, 100%, total wipeout. If you held gold, you maintained purchasing power entirely. An ounce of gold bought the same basket of goods before, during, and after the collapse. The currency changed, gold didn't. Venezuela, 2010s. Same story, different continent. The bolivar went from 10 per dollar to over 1 million per dollar in a decade. Anyone holding bolivars lost everything. Anyone holding dollars or gold survived. Lebanon, 2019 to 2025. The pound was pegged at 1,507 per dollar for 22 years, rock solid, until it wasn't. The peg broke. Within 4 years, the rate hit 89,000 per dollar. Nurses who had $50,000 in savings woke up with $1,000. The ones who kept their savings in physical US dollars outside the banking system, they maintained 100% of their purchasing power. Not because the dollar was magical, but because they held a currency that wasn't collapsing. David isn't in Weimar Germany. He's not in Venezuela. He's in the United States, the richest, most powerful country on earth. But here's the thing about patterns. They don't care about exceptionalism. Every failed currency believed it was different. Every government insisted it had learned from history. Every population trusted the system until the day it stopped working. The signs are visible if you're willing to look. Iraq,
Financial crisis. Over 70% of the monetary supply inaccessible due to banking restrictions. The dinar devalued from $11.90 per dollar to unofficial rates approaching $17.50. Citizens smuggling currency across borders. Stage 3 behavior. Turkey. Gold deposit accounts doubled in a single quarter. Citizens fleeing to precious metals. Runaway inflation. This is stage 4. Currency substitution has begun. Lebanon. 98% currency collapse already executed. Banking system technically insolvent. Stage 5. Complete failure. And then there's the United States. $36 trillion in debt as of Q1 2026. Debt to GDP ratio above 120%. Interest payments on the national debt now exceed defense spending. The deficit grows regardless of which party controls Congress. This isn't a political problem, it's a mathematical one. You cannot service exponentially growing debt without devaluing the currency. The system has no other lever to pull. David's $320,000 isn't safe because the economy is strong. It's nominally protected because the collapse is slow enough that he doesn't panic and withdraw everything. But slow collapses are still collapses. They just give you more time to pretend everything is fine.
So what survives? History gives us the answer. 5 asset classes made it through every currency collapse since 1923. First, precious metals, gold and silver. The assets governments can't print and central banks can't debase. During Weimar, if you held paper marks, you lost everything. If you held gold, you maintained purchasing power entirely. Same in Zimbabwe, same in Venezuela, same in every collapse. Second, foreign hard currency. When your domestic money is dying, holding someone else's stable currency is complete protection. Lebanese nurses who kept savings in US dollars maintained 100% of their wealth. Those who kept pounds lost 98%. Third, productive equities with export revenue. Real companies that own real assets, factories, equipment, land. When currency collapses, the nominal price of those assets rises to match inflation because the assets themselves haven't disappeared. Venezuela's stock market rose over 3,400% in 2024. Not because companies got more valuable, because it took more bolivares to equal the same real value. Fourth, consumables and barter goods. Post-World War II Germany, cigarettes became currency. Medical supplies, food, fuel, batteries, anything with immediate consumption value. These are tactical, not strategic, but during acute crisis phases, they provide liquidity when formal systems freeze. Fifth, agricultural land. The immobile asset that produces the one thing humans can't live without, food. But land has vulnerabilities. It's illiquid. Governments know where it is and can tax or seize it. It works best when productive, located outside failing jurisdictions, or held through protective structures. And what goes to zero? Fixed income securities denominated in the collapsing currency. Bonds, treasury notes, anything where you're a creditor to a failing state. Weimar bondholders lost everything. Argentina 2001, bondholders saw 70% haircuts. When the currency collapses, the claim becomes worthless. Savings accounts in domestic currency held within failing banking systems. Lebanese deposits lost 95% of value as the pound devalued. The nominal amount stayed the same, the value disappeared. Now let's answer the question I posed at the beginning. Why 27 years? A study analyzing 775 fiat currencies over 500 years found a consistent pattern. The average lifespan is 27 years, not because of some mystical force, but because that's roughly how long it takes for a debt-based system to reach mathematical unsustainability. Stage 1 takes about 5 to 7 years. Government spending exceeds revenue. Debt starts accumulating but stays manageable. Stage 2 takes another 7 to 10 years. Debt service costs start consuming larger portions of the budget. Money printing begins in earnest to cover gaps. Stage 3 takes 5 to 8 years. Purchasing power erosion becomes noticeable. Citizens start seeking alternatives. Inflation accelerates. Stage 4 is the acceleration. This can happen over months. Capital flight, currency substitution, hyperinflation. Stage 5 is collapse. Total loss of confidence. The currency becomes worthless.
The US dollar entered stage 1 in 1971. We're now 54 years in. We've been in stage 3 since roughly 2008, the financial crisis, the massive money printing, the zero interest rate policy, the quantitative easing. We're not at the beginning of this process, we're in the late stages. And here's the specific threat nobody's talking about. The debt to GDP ratio crossing 120% historically marks the point of no return, the point where even optimistic economists admit there's no fiscal path to sustainability without either default or hyperinflation. The US crossed 120% in 2020. We're at 124% as of Q1 2026. Every country that crossed this threshold without defaulting experienced severe currency devaluation within 5 to 10 years. Japan is the only exception, and they've been in economic stagnation for 3 decades. That's the number, that's the threshold, that's what triggers the final stage. If this deep dive helped you see the pattern differently, liking the video helps us fund more research like this. Now, regarding David's $320,000. David's not going to panic. He's not going to liquidate his 401k. He's going to keep working, keep saving, keep trusting the system. And maybe that's fine. Maybe the dollar stabilizes. Maybe the debt gets under control. Maybe we're the exception to 5,000 years of monetary history. Or maybe we're not. The question isn't if your currency will fail. Historically, it's when. The average fiat currency lasts 27 years. 99% of all currencies that have ever existed no longer exist. The dollar is 54 years old. The debt to GDP ratio is 124%. The interest payments exceed defense spending. Every day past the threshold is borrowed time, and the interest on that borrowed time, it's coming due in purchasing power. Your savings aren't safe because the number is big. They're nominally protected because the collapse is slow enough that you don't notice. But if you think currency collapse is the end game, you're missing the bigger picture. Because when money dies, it doesn't just take your savings, it reshapes entire economies, redistributes power, and creates opportunities most people will never see coming. The real question isn't how to survive the collapse, it's how to position yourself before the 120% threshold turns into a 150% crisis. And when that happens, your 401k won't save you, but the 5 assets that survived every collapse since 1923 might.